Mino Line Media presents the Business First Podcast.
Hi, all, and welcome to a new episode of Business First with Sonia Aline. I am your host, and today we welcome into the studio Larisse Brown, who is an author, entrepreneur, workplace educator, and leadership coach. She is also the founder of C-Track Training. Welcome, Larisse. How are you?
I'm well, Sonia. I'm looking forward to the conversation we're going to have.
Yeah, we're glad to have you here. Part of what we always discuss here is getting a sense of the background of someone's background who started a business. There's always this thread of people may not have known they had wanted to start a business, but there are all of these things that have happened in their background that allow them to use these tools to create their business. And so please explain to us, part of your background and what led you to create C-Track Training.
C-Track was always about education. And growing up, I'm one of six, and my mother was a special education teacher. And she always said, the most important thing her and my father emphasized was school. And I took that really seriously. And so for me, I really thought academics was going to be my path to success. And I was the co-valedictorian in 8th grade. I went to all girls boarding school, magna cum laude, all the things. And then I graduated school and I was like, wait a minute, these academic skills are not life skills. They're not business skills, right? It's because academics is a lot of, well, what can you memorize, right? Yes, you can have, there's some verbal exchanges there, but it's not really people. It's just how much information can you take in? And then so when I realized that, it really put me on a journey to understand communication, and that much of the success that anyone has in business, but even if you're in the labor market and looking for a job, is around how well you communicate and around the different ways you have to communicate. So you have to communicate to influence others, to motivate others. You have to communicate to resolve conflict. You have to communicate to build and foster trust. And so when I really dug into the workplace, it really helped me understand that we don't get those skills in school. We might get some introduction to them at home, but really work asks you to honor all the ways you have to communicate in order to build relationships with other people. And that's really how C-Track was born, both with students and recognizing they don't get it in school, but also particularly at work, because you realize at work competency matters, but a lot more is about the relationships you foster.
What are some of the things that you discovered around the importance of communications and how much of it that we don't have when we, like you said, when it's a skill that we absolutely need? What were some of the discoveries that were even surprising to you, knowing that this is a skill that is needed?
That you can know a lot, but nobody cares unless it's delivered in a way that they care about. So when you really start to dig into community, and we know this, we can sense it. It's like, we emphasize a lot, especially women. Okay, let me get this correct. Let me deliver this according to the script. But what it ultimately comes down to is, do I feel the connection as you're talking? What's the tonality of your voice? Did you hit the right sentiment? It comes down to, well, are you making eye contact? How do your shoulders look? I'm looking at the whole person as they deliver this message. And we know that. We know it's not what you say, how you say it, even in terms of arguments, right? Like if somebody escalates, we're like, see, now we're not just talking about what was said, we're talking about how you said it. But you don't realize at work, even when it comes to influencing others, you could have the best idea. If it's dry, no one's bought in, right? Like you start, or you could have authority, but we expect our leaders also to have presence. You hear it pop up in the feedback that people give you, like, you're missing that executive presence, or you're missing that it. And what they're really talking about is when you get in front of people, you don't show up fully in a way that's assured. And yes, you can say great things, but if there's not a compliment to that, then no, we're not fully going to buy into you.
Right. What is it that allowed you to really focus in on, because when you think about presence, right, or when you think about not even just presence, but when you think about some of the challenges that people are having in the workplace and in business, what is it that made you really want to focus on the importance of communicating and having that presence?
I like to talk, but also, when I was 25, I got let go. It was one of my, it was from an organization, and I had worked really hard. And I mentioned 25, not to give away my age, but to say I think there is a naivety that I went into the workforce with, especially as someone who believed who was trained in academics to work really hard. Like, you're going to study, you're
Mhm.
going to put in the hours, and guess what? You're going to get those awards. And then taking that same
Mhm.
mentality to work, it was a wake up call when the feedback
Yeah.
that got to me was, well, you're not executive material. You don't have executive presence. Because in my mind, I was like, I'm doing all the work and some. I'm making sure that I'm taking initiative in the ways that I can. So, what do you mean I'm not executive material? And then you go, oh, there's a presentation element to that. There's a way that when you're
Right.
sitting around and you're brainstorming or people are sharing ideas in the morning meeting, not only don't sit there silent, but when you say something, it has to be something that shows you understand the bottom line of the business. Well, or it has to be specifically for Black women. They do so much research around, it's not just how we say it, but it's also, what do we look like as we say it? How are you packaged? In your personal
Mhm.
presentation. And so that was a wake up call for me. That shifted me towards, wow, like you could know a lot. It, and it doesn't that's not the politics of how people advance, right? It's not competence. It's more than that. It's a lot of presentation, which on the other end is also why we get so frustrated when we see people who we're like, you're not putting in the work that I'm putting in. How did you get there?
Right.
Because they are really self-assured. They are willing to be visible. They are willing to build the relationships, and they're more direct in asking for the sponsorship. Hey, this is what I want. Where the rest of us feel like we have to earn it. And so that was a big piece for me in my personal journey for saying, wait a minute, there's more here.
Yeah. I'd like you to talk a little bit about the process or the belief system that we have of earning, right? Of being worthy and how much that really, and I don't know if, I'm sure they realize it after they've been coached, after they go through your program, but how much people don't understand that sometimes is at the bottom of, or, really kind of underlying some of the challenges that we're having, being, understanding and believing that we're worthy.
And to your point, Tony, it's we don't believe we're worthy because we also don't have a baseline for it, right? Like, a lot of things are our reference point. And so I think what happens
Mhm.
among um, well, I know what happens among Black women and Black people, even when we start to talk about dollars, we already start off underpaid anyway. And so I think
Right.
a story, one of the things about worthiness is, in identity development, we're always trying to figure out, well, where do I stand? Where I stand? Well, we're looking at the people around us, which you can't say that that's not the best metric, but it's not the one that gets the highest paid, we know. And so I mentioned that
Right.
to say, I was, when I used to teach, I did a communications class with a woman in sales. And she was like, listen, I'll talk to you. Well, I was more focused on developing my own ability to sell at the time. Another way we have to communicate, right? Not just selling ourselves and promoting ourselves, but also how we build relationships and trust with clients. And she was saying, I'm the only woman on my team. And I told my supervisor, I'm going to ask for a $20,000 raise next year. And I was
Mm.
just getting used to hearing about money. And I was like, okay, $20,000 raise. But what I did is I was having a conversation with another Black woman who was thinking about leaving her organization. I said, I just had a conversation with a woman who told me she's going to ask for a $20,000 raise. And you know what that Black woman did? Because she had gotten an offer at another company. And the company she was at said, well, what can we do to make you stay? She said, pay me $20,000 more. And they did. But
And
she
they
said,
did.
Larisse, I would have not even known to act. Most people, you think you might get a cost of living raise. If you're lucky, maybe somebody will slide you five or
Yeah.
10. But for us, the audacity, right, to ask for 20K. But that, to your point in terms of worth, I think we struggle with establishing it because our barometer, even among each other, is so low. It's like when you start off here and somebody's like, when they talk about breadcrumbing, right? Like, if you
Right.
start off breadcrumbed and somebody offers you something, they're like, well, maybe here's a sandwich. You're like, a sandwich, right? Versus when you start off with a sandwich and someone's like, we can cut this and customize it and cut, like for us, it feels like a big leap. And so
Yeah.
to use that metaphor, I think for us, we have to start getting to, this is what I'm getting paid, but this is what I know they also are paying other people. So let's have a conversation that's just not where we are, but where we know we should really be thinking that we are and beyond. And I think that's a better way of us, establishing at least equity in terms of being paid, if not getting to our worth, which is far beyond money, but at least getting to a fair understanding of our value in a labor market or for an organization. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm glad you talked about pay because, and I've said this, or I've had this conversation pretty often that a lot of times we are underpaid because we don't know what to ask for. We don't know what's available, And it was either the last podcast or the podcast before, I had been mentioning, I have a friend who works for a major technology company. She had done all the due diligence. The woman in the role before her told her, this is, what they're asking for. She went in and asked for a solid 6 figures and thought she was doing really well because it was more than what she had been making before. And they turned around, the company turned around and offered her 20,000 more. Right. And so she's just like, if they offered me 20,000 more, then how low did I come in, for this? And it was because she didn't know what was available. But to your point, what she was already asking for was way above what she had made before.
It's a negotiation technique, actually. It's called anchoring, right? It's like if somebody's like, Sonia, my one-on-one coaching is $20,000, but I have this deal for 5. You're looking at the phone, you're like, because the reference point is the 20, right? But going the other way, if you're like, well, I'm making $5,000, you're gonna look at that 20 and you're like, that's a big jump. Maybe I should ask for 10. And so again, it's a psychology, and it really does take support to build the muscle, to build, like you said, the worth, which is really the confidence and understanding that you merit that. That absolutely, it's a shift. It's a shift, and it does come from these open conversations like this, and it comes from other people having the courage and willingness and the transparency to say, listen, this is how much I'm asking for. And I think money is one of those things where I do hope more of us get in circles where we talk about it.
So Larisse, please tell the audience a little bit about your business and the type of clients that you attract, and the type of coaching and the type of education that they can expect.
So they always say you attract who you are, right? Or some version of yourself. So I'll break this down in motives. So naturally, I grew up as a people pleaser. So being one of 6, all my other siblings felt like they were very good early on being clear about what they want. And I was like, oh, that seems aggressive. So I'm going to withhold what I want unless it works with what my parents want or what somebody else wants. So I people pleasing, but also high achieving, right? So very in tune with what other people need from me or need me to be. And then also very focused on role clarity, taking on the appropriate challenges, being very much like I earned it, seeking feedback. So when clients first came to me, that's what it was. It was this, I'm at a point where I need to say these things because I'm building imbalanced relationships, but I need a language for it. That's always what people would say, like, come to me, Larisse, how do I say this? Like, Larisse, I have to respond to this person. Like, what's a language I could use where it didn't feel offensive? I mean, that's a subjective point anyway, but some people could be more, not even direct than others. Some people were just more comfortable with or less concerned with how somebody might perceive something. Usually the people who come to me, there's an intention to be more assertive at the same time, not disrespectful. So building their comfort in, how do I address this conflict? How do I negotiate with that person versus accommodating? How do I build relationships where I'm appreciated, meaning like where I'm comfortable saying no, where I set new expectations? Over time, what that has shifted, especially in terms of working with women, ultimately you realize that if you're a woman and you want to lead, of course, there's a basis to how you resolve conflict. But it's also an understanding, it goes back to that previous conversation about how do you prioritize your strengths with the bottom line? And so what it means is sometimes, again, this mentality that we get, especially as Black women or women in general, it's this overgive. How much can I do, right? There's this almost like we believe the more I do, the more I'll be appreciated. When the reality is, it's about what do you do that impacts one of the 5 organizational bottom lines, right? Are you decreasing our costs? Are you increasing our costs? Are you expanding the market value? Are you giving more value to our shareholders, right? Are you bringing in a new market segment? It's about, what do I do that gets you to that level, especially for companies? And you can do a lot and still not be direct to the bottom line. So how do we think about, when we talk about ourselves and we build that presence, what is it that I do that lets me know, okay, I'm contributing to the organization, so I don't feel like I have to do all the things? A final piece of that is, you do have to get to a point in an organization where you're comfortable with your perspective and the fact that other people can disagree with you, and you want them to. So it really is, there's a term used called psychological safety, but it's more so about, you know, we don't ever know how other people can respond. We hope they respond at least respectfully. Everybody's entitled to disagree. You want them to, but you have to build a perspective in yourself with a clarity that, especially as women or as people at work, that is not, I'll just go along with anything. And again, no one at work at the table is like, I'll just take anything. But we can be so concerned with how we're going to come off that we're like, well, this is what I would prefer, but I also could see your side and see this side. And of course, everybody has a validity to their perspective. But again, that third piece of it really is you got to drop the perfectionism. You can be a villain in someone's story, and that doesn't make you bad. It just means you all see things differently. You don't need to use hedge words. Well, maybe just so. Could we also, you want to say, you can set expectations. This is my perspective. You may see things differently and move on. But everything isn't this is what I think, but I could also see this, because there is an expectation as you rise in leadership, but also in assurance. You're going to offer your perspective. People can take it or leave it. So I find now, initially when clients first came to me, a lot of it was around, I need to say these things and I'm uncomfortable because I'm getting out of people pleasing. But now it's much more comfort with standing in your authority. It's, I want to be even more at ease with conflict and not just disagreement. I can do that, but building more balanced relationships, advocating for more of what I want. I want more clarity around, you know what? I already know this about myself and what my strengths are. Let me be very clear on how that's connected to the bottom line. I may want a promotion, but I also may just want more appreciation. What kind of relationships do I need to build? What is my communication style? And as a result of knowing that, how can I be more clear? How can I present myself with more authority? How can I be more motivational or influential based on what my goals are in the day to day? So those are the kinds of women that I work with. And I will say the distinction is often we think leadership, we always think it has to be people management. But what I found is, especially because we do know leadership still commands more of our time, it's also self leadership. At a certain point at work, anybody, you're going to get run over if you cannot express disagreement. You're going to get run over or seen as somebody with less value if you don't know how to articulate that value. You are going to not be invited to sit at the tables where they're making decisions if you don't have a perspective. So even if you're not managing a team, you still are a leader in that you have an expertise. And so those are the kinds of clients that come to me now as well, honoring their expertise, and they want to present in that way.
And I'm glad you said, leadership of self too, because the business world or the corporate world, like they're not easy places, right?
No.
And to the point that we spoke earlier is no one teaches us how to manage in these places. And so sometimes it can be very easy for us to feel like we're being railroaded or run over and take it really personally, right? Because I think sometimes, and you talked about this as well, we take how we managed in school and we just feel like we just transfer all of that into the workplace. And they're not necessarily easy or soft or safe spaces. And so, but it doesn't mean, like you said, that you can't find your communication style so that you can be a valued voice in your organization and be valued and find value that you want for yourself as well.
And they're to your point, Sonia, they're part of being valued is recognizing that you have to, but putting the value in yourself is still too vague. Work is this place where you realize like, oh, I'm up against people. And I always tell people, don't recognize that, like, not read the room. Everybody goes in, yeah, read the room, but like also recognize, like, have situational awareness to where you're setting precedent. So I want people to think about that. Like every time you do something, you set a precedent. It's like if I'm like, Sonia, I'm sure you've heard someone say, Sonia, you usually do that though. Like I usually can go to you for that. People get upset at you if you stop doing things that you usually do for them, even though you don't have to. It's a very weird thing, right? It's like, I don't have to, right? But you set precedent. And so what I mean by that is at work, it's even like it's easier to set precedent. Sonia, yeah, I don't know, she'll do that, or like we don't have to remind, like we don't have to give her more for doing that. Like we don't realize that at a certain point, the accountability comes down to you are saying yes to these behaviors. And therefore, you've become this archetype, this character where people are now like, well, we expect you to accommodate. You didn't say anything before. Or like, you think you're going to be appreciated by doing more. Well, if guess what? If everyone's sitting around the table and they're like, oh, we have an idea and who wants to implement it? And you feel the guilt of being like, we need to get, and guess what? Everybody will sit in silence until you do it. Like, so I want us also to be conscious of where are we setting precedent with our yes, because that also starts to dictate what people approach us with. And for there are some people at work who, and again, not to say that I always tell clients I work with, I'm never concerned with them coming off as rude, because that's not there. You're a people pleaser. Your intention is not even, speaking of reference points, you're not trying to get rude. I'm not trying to reel you back in. You're just trying to get assertive. You're trying to get clear and more direct. And so, again, I mentioned that to say it's a consciousness to where in situations we set precedent that we're willing to take less, that we're willing to do more, that we are willing to whatever it is that we feel like is for the good of the team. It's not to say that we shouldn't do those things, but should that always be what we do? That's not how you get appreciation at work. You only get appreciation with opposition, right? It's like no one can appreciate really learning how to do a pull up until they were like, oh, I didn't know how to do a pull up. Now I knows what goes into it. So people can't fully appreciate your yes and all you do unless you're willing to say, listen, I'll do this for you this time, but like next time you got to find somebody else. Or I recognize in this situation, let's negotiate here, or I'm willing to take less, but like we will have a conversation in 6 months and I want it written down that we can revisit it again. Like it is that comfort with saying, okay, but this is not what you should expect of me continuously. And that's a different muscle to build, because it's so much easier just to accommodate and then let it go. But then we get frustrated when we're put in that situation repeatedly.
So we all know that a lot has changed since before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and post. And so what have you had to do in those periods to reevaluate your business and for you to become more valued in this leadership coaching space?
Oh, what a great question. So in the leadership coaching space, I've had to sit and say, well, one, I had to recognize everybody doesn't want to be a leader anymore. I think pre-pandemic, there was we can all get there, especially among women. I can get there. I'm looking at the advancement. I'm a first-time manager, I'm a middle manager. After the pandemic, even during the pandemic, I think people were like, we need to find new ways to foster. Now, in terms of engagement and people, I've had people say to me, that's not a priority right now. Like work isn't a priority right now. So it shifted pain points, I'll say. Pre 2020, it was like you want to lead, you feel like you're experiencing the barriers that they put on women. Whether that is you're experiencing people who we expect leaders to solve conflict, but at the same time, you don't know how to do it in a style that they expect a woman to do it. So to do it, but maybe not do it and present the information as harshly as a man. Or you want to present yourself as a leader, you're uncomfortable fully advocating and asking what the next step is. It was more like that. Now, the first question do you want to be someone who is at ease with conflict? Do you want to be someone who's sitting in those rooms where decisions are made? Do you want to be someone who has the ability to influence others on the team? That's where we start now. So I would say that's a big shift. I would also say it now starts earlier. There was one point, which to me, I was like, I couldn't believe how, but now the leadership question really does start between 4 to 8 years of your career. Some people would even argue at like the second to fourth year. And some of the research is also because you need to see work-life balance. But I think the other piece of it is if you don't learn the skills of leadership early, it puts you in a loop. You loop a little bit longer, right? Meaning like you can struggle with conflict for like I do think I will say this. I think among younger women who are looking for coaching, even just around I need to improve my executive presence. I think because of the internet and everything, podcasts like yours, they're getting that information earlier. Things that were whispered in circles, now you can go Google online. So I think that accessibility to everyone is like, even imposter syndrome. Even college students like, I have imposter syndrome. Whereas one time it was just like you were an executive sitting in a room, in a boardroom, you had imposter syndrome. Now they're seeing it in themselves. So one, I just think it's the ubiquity of information that's available. Like when you have a medical symptom and you go online, you're like, yep, I have that too. That, like I think it's some of that.
Mhm.
But I also think it's in recognizing if you want to be a leader, they're asking that question earlier because it does change things. I remember doing a poll in my own friend group. There is a shift when a woman takes on a family, and they're still talking about this around the policies, right? Because we aren't the best when it comes to family leaves or in supporting people, or women as they go on leaves, or like or in asking leaders and what they have to do. Well, if you have to go home after, you have other things you have to do, it does take you away from the opportunity, or it takes you away from work. So again, things are starting earlier with the information, but also you have to ask that question earlier because it does require an exchange. Am I willing to spend more time here? To the point of, am I even willing to navigate office politics here? That can be exhaustive. The kind of relationships you have to build, the way you have to build them, not only in the office, but outside the office. Am I going to the happy hour? Who is that I should know? Who should I be having a conversation with? Who's going to sponsor me? What's that company event? Oh, I need to speak at this meeting. These are all,
I
so
feel
I
that.
will say they've also that 4 to 8 year mark where they're asking themselves, okay, I want to be a leader, but I recognize I'm backing down from conflict. I recognize I don't present with executive presence, even though I'm in this management position now. That's a group that has started to come to me more too, which is fascinating.
Wow. The freedom in that is also interesting because before you had to push, or the thought was, yes, I have to do this
Yeah,
because I've gotten this education. I know that the opportunities are there. They're telling me that I could do this, and so it's interesting that the freedom that people have to go, yeah, like that's not a priority, or that's not important to me, or yes, I don't want that level of stress on me is
right.
also very interesting. What is next for Larisse and your business?
I've unlocked significant milestones that it takes people to go from school, meaning a graduate, whether they choose to go to college or not, to understanding the labor market, to success in the workplace. And they're all different. But I have seen them all.
Mhm.
And so obviously school, there's a lot of emphasis on academics. But I think even if you're not looking at academics, if you go to a trade school or something else, it really is the discipline and willingness to show up, the willingness to be corrected and receive feedback and just repeat. That's really what you're asking for somebody to do, to repeat. And also, school is, especially after high school, when you first have to develop that communication skill of being an advocate for yourself. Like nobody's there to tap you and be like, "Did you do your homework?" If you didn't do your homework, I mean,
Right.
that's you didn't do your homework. But also, do you need help to do your homework? Nobody's going to tap you. You have to start going to other people now as this advocate of yourself. But when you get into the labor market, a lot of it is your ability to influence other people and also prove yourself as trustworthy. And students are struggling here because, uh, even though digitally it takes a lot of touch points, they say about 7 times for people to build trust online. Sometimes I think we tend to think in person we don't need to have as many touch points when the reality is we do. Of course, it's, we can cut through, maybe we can cut some of that in half, but someone is still looking to build trust with you, meaning they don't know you. So it's they could want to help you, but they need to see, hey, you did your research in advance. Hey, you're looking me in the eye. Hey, you're talking when I ask you about experiences that you had, you're talking to me about that. So really students have to foster the ability when you're in the labor market. This is people. How do you talk to them? How do you present yourself as trustworthy? How do you present yourself as curious? And also, how do you recognize like how you solve a problem for employers? Students do this thing where they're like, I want to work in marketing. That's wonderful. It's more helpful if you say, listen, I have experience online helping build communities. And so at an organization, I'm looking to work at a social impact organization or maybe an education to use that skills to help them better interface with parents, or with a company where I can help grow their digital imprint so they can reach new customers. Students have to learn that language, right? But then the other piece, when you get to work, a lot of that, again, it goes into that self leadership. Can you take accountability? Not just do your job, but what's the result of doing your job? Everybody's different. Even you and I, Sonia, when we get on a team, we have to ask those explicit questions. Hey, Sonia, how do you like information delivered to you? Meaning, like, do you just want me, hey, it's over, I send it to you, or you send me an email, Larisse, with a task? Some people don't respond. You could be like, but some people, and that's fine. Like you'll just get it when you get it and you trust it. Other people are like, I need you to respond and give me a deadline. Maybe I said something you don't like. then we have to figure out conflict, right? Are you going to be like, did she know that she said something that I don't like? Or are you comfortable with saying, hey, Larisse, can we revisit something that you said? I'm just curious about it.
Right.
So again, when people get into work, this expectation that people are going to do things like you got to throw that out the window, and you have to have a comfort with saying, listen, I'm trying to get us on the same page here. And the
Mhm.
other piece of it is, we often think about conflict as this clash. People think about it like that, but really conflict is a part of
Right.
learning. And you have to become a person who people can disagree with openly, who people can challenge openly, and you can challenge them, because that is the only way you improve. You will get stuck. You will plateau anywhere if you get to a point where you are so defensive you can't take in knowledge. And that's not intellectual as much as that's emotional, no, social emotional. Like, how do you regulate yourself? How comfortable are you with being corrected? So where my business is headed, I said all that is to leverage all these skills, still continuing to work with women. I think we're going to only continue to see more women leaders. At the same time, putting them within this pipeline of recognizing, how do we help students, especially since the pandemic, understand the socio emotional skills they need to transition to be advocates of themselves, to understand how to talk about themselves, but also how to establish norms on teams so that they can successfully transition from school to work. I'm excited about
Right.
that.
Yeah, and I think so. And so there's so many things there. Number one, those are the skills that AI can't replace, right? Like AI can do a number of wonderful things for us, but those are the skills that they can't replace. And this notion of conflict or understanding the importance of conflict, I think, is going to be huge. It should be, at least, because that's why we're in the problems that we're in now. Like, we can't
Yes.
talk politically. No, we're not listening to each other politically. We can't listen on social issues. We're not listening to each other on racial issues. Like, people are on opposite sides and you have to pick a side. Like, there's no discussion anymore. And I'm not telling you, that we can't. I mean, this is why society is failing. And so, yes, that piece about understanding the value of conflict. That conflict doesn't mean that we have to be butting heads, but it's understanding, like, what can we learn from each other. I'm glad you made that point, because I think it's so needed right now.
It is. It
Um,
is.
Please add to that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're at a point now where, like you said, they find that there's three types of conflict at work. Some of it is straight up like, if you ever said to yourself, there's no point, sometimes you're like, there's no point because me and this person are so different. Like, I just do not like them. Everybody says work is not personal. Yes, it is. Some people you just don't like. Some of it now is, you're right, because you know what? That person knows what they do. That's a microaggression. Some of it is, there's some things people can't talk about at work when it comes to religion. Some people like, sometimes there are literally people just can't get close to it. There's a personality clash. Some of it is around tasks where it's like, why am I the person who whose job is this? Why am I the person that has to pick up this? Right? Why am I doing that? And another component of it is the path, right? It's the process. There are better ways. And so we do want to look at conflict, and that's the thing about breaking it down, is like, if we just make it this abstract or this broad thing where it's always about you got to win and I lose, or it's zero sum, we don't ever make progress, because that is where innovation happens. That's also where learning happens. That is where actually, what conflict can do, if people are willing to hear another side, is it can, if you made an error, you don't have to repeat it. But if we just dig in and we're like, my thinking is the best thinking, but you don't have the evidence for it, but you're not willing to hear another way, you're going to keep doing a lot of things that are broken. I think a lot of people can resonate with that. There are companies where you almost roll your eyes when people talk about trying to do something new, because you're like, you're up against so much inertia here, because people don't want to hear anyone else's perspective. And even if they hear it, they don't really want to implement it. Right. And then the other end, we also have to get on the culture of nice people who build the idea that, like, well, we don't need to say anything. That's fine. Yeah, those are frustrating places too, right? Because
Mhm.
you're like, nothing ever gets done. And because in this culture of nice, the idea is that even if that person is not doing something they're accountable for, well, you can't really give them
Mhm.
accountability, or they don't feel in their own self a sense of accountability to you or to anyone else to do it. So I do think we're looking for this space where we can have disagreement openly, but all the research again shows that that's modeled by leaders. And so I think women are in a perfect position to model it, with the amount of not gonna use the word grace, because that's one of those words I feel like we abstract, like sometimes conflict is conflict, but to do it with a recognition that we can hear what someone else has to say and then take it in, and not necessarily a moment. I think some people think you have to get everything packaged in a moment. We had this great session and now no, but to say, listen, I hear you. I'm going to take this in, and if appropriate, I will make some adjustments. I think even people hearing that from a leader is going to be more powerful for how they navigate conflict in their teams, and then even how they navigate exchanges with other leaders. Okay, you're willing to hear me. I think that's the first step. And what you're talking about, Sonia, exactly, is we're at the point where people are just unwilling to hear anything that they can disagree with, and that's why we're stalled.
Yeah, yeah. So where can we follow you? Where can we keep up with your progress, or reach out to you for coaching sessions?
Yes, so I post a lot on LinkedIn, Larisse Brown.
Mhm.
I'm also on Instagram as Larisse, but I would say the best place is LinkedIn. I'm always posting there, always sharing new information about what's happening in the workforce and different ways to, provide value about what are things we need to know about the workforce right now, but also what are some things we need to know about how to establish ourselves as leaders who are comfortable in conflict, resolving conflict, who recognize our strengths, but who also, present ourselves with the authority. I think part of imposter syndrome that people talk about is we don't have a language, or we don't use the appropriate language to talk about how powerful we are. And I always enjoy helping people understand that executive presence is instilling confidence. And as women, we have it. We just have to, stop hedging, like stop using the but and fully say it with your chest. So follow me on LinkedIn. I am a top voice over there. So always sharing good information about leadership in the workforce.
Very good. Thank you, Larisse Brown, founder of C-Track Training. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you all for listening. We'll be back again next week with another great guest. Take care.
The Business First podcast is hosted and produced by Sonia Aline. Executive producer Ken Johnson. Find the Business First podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Odyssey, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, TuneIn, or wherever you get your podcast. On social media on IG at business_first_podcast. Follow the Mean Old Line Media Podcast Network on IG at Mean Old Line Media. Get the Mean Old Line Media app in the App Store or Google Play. The Business First podcast is a Mean Old Line Media production.